So you've touched a little bit bases on this earlier, but I want to stress this in full. What are I would say, if you could give me the three main differences between the U.S. purchase, a legal purchase in the U.S. and in Israel?
That's a really great question. And when I speak for Nefesh B'Nefesh, one of the things that I tell in the lecture is lose your expectation. Things are done here completely different. Don't try to compare. They are apples and oranges, nothing to do with each other. If we touch on some of the basics, if we start with the most important date in a transaction, in the US, as you're well aware, the date of closing is the most important day. It's the day you make the large and last payment and you take possession and get the deed, the actual deed to the apartment. In Israel, it's quite the opposite. You actually, the defining date of a transaction in Israel is the day you sign the purchase contract. Once you sign the purchase contract, all the timeline, everything starts. So you need to report the transaction to the tax office, for example, within 30 days of the signing. You make the payment of the purchase tax within 60 days of the signing. Usually payment schedule also would be 60, 90, 120 days from the signing. Everything starts from that. Another very important you have to take into consideration is like what I said earlier. There are no title insurances or escrow company. This is done by your lawyer. There are no contingencies, meaning once you sign the contract, you should have finished in doing all your checks. So there are no financing contingencies, so you have to take care of it beforehand. There are no inspection contingencies, which also you want to make sure you take care of beforehand.
So the whole due diligence process is totally different.
Yes, it's not after you sign the contract. You have to do it before signing the contract.
Right.
Another major difference is the deed. In the US, people actually physically transfer an ownership deed between a buyer and a seller, or seller to a buyer. In Israel, it's most of the time done electronically. These are documents that you sign, and at the end of the day, I take care of transferring the title in the registry in the buyer's name. And these are documents that, for example, you can always go to the right authority and issue a new one every year, every 6 months, whenever you want to see it. It's not something that you actually physically have to hold and transfer to the next person.
Amazing. So basically, in the due diligence process, I find it the most unique difference because in the U.S., once you sign a contract and then you start due diligence, you can go back with what you found and renegotiate terms, price, etc. In Israel, if you didn't take care of the proper due diligence, I found that people found out things that they didn't know of after signing the contract, and there's no going back. Meaning, it's important to do the right due diligence beforehand, and I think the most important part for our clients to understand is once you agree upon a verbal agree, upon a purchase price and negotiating the terms of the payment plan, you then start negotiating the due diligence, and we're using that with whatever the lawyer found, and then you could actually back off, in good faith, of course, from the deal if you found mistakes or things not according to what was initially.
Yeah, that's correct. In Israel, the only time where a verbal agreement is not, it's not something that is binding in a way, is when you buy or sell property. Actually, it's set by law that the only commitment when it comes to buying and selling property, it has to be done in writing and has to be signed upon. So if you shook hand and agreed on certain terms, it's not the end of the deal. And everybody has the stories. I had once a story that I was actually coming, from our Jerusalem office to a signing in Herzliya. I was getting into Tel Aviv, and the client said, actually half an hour before the signing, the client said, "Okay, there's some things that I don't like. I want to back out." And there was actually no issues with there. They're legally, they're not binding. You can't take them to court because until it's a signed contract, every side can back up. It's for the good and for the bad. I mean, sometimes if you want to buy and somebody backs out, it's an issue. And sometimes if you want to back up, it's in your interest. But the signing is the defining date, like I said before. And it's very, very important to know that until then, nothing has finished. Now, of course, courts have done rulings when it comes to good faith. If people cancel for no apparent reason, or let's say, if you're from the buyer side, if suddenly the seller negotiated with someone else while negotiating with you, the courts have ruled that it's negotiating not in good faith, and they could actually award you with compensations or other, sometimes it could even go as far as making sure that you will end up buying the property. This is more rare.